Amnon is apparently the heir to the throne. However, we learn a few things about him. He's a stalker. That's the uglier way of putting it. The more theological way of putting it, he's overwhelmed with lust behavior. Tamar, his half-sister, is the object of that lust. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Okay? Sensuality is driving Amnon's life to the point where he is sick. Literally, you look awful. What is it? Now, one way of painting that is, I'm lovesick. But if you read the whole story with a careful ear, you'll learn maybe we didn't have love going on here. Maybe this wasn't lovesick. Maybe it was, for lack of a better word, lust sick. Eros, the great Greek word, is a very egocentric, a very narcissistic love. I love you because you're pretty. I love you because you turn me on. I love you because you gratify me. I don't even need to know your name. And I speak embarrassedly because I have the XY chromosome. And I have hung out on beaches before. I have hung out in watering holes. I know how deceitful that can be. And at the time, you don't particularly care that you're being deceived or deceiving. This is Amnon. He's caught up in this. And furthermore, when he's aware it's going on, he does absolutely nothing to lessen that stimulus. It's interesting that that happens 3,000 years ago. I don't know how I can make any relevant comparisons of life in 2010 with life 3,000 years. I don't think I can pull this off, other than the similarities are evidently Amnon and the American culture today have some similarities. I am willing to bet that Amnon didn't face some of the opportunities or the challenges that people do in our culture. Any of you know Nona Dieter? No, that's surprising. Nona Dieter sat in English class next to me my senior year in high school. And she looked really good. And she loved knit sweaters. And I loved her wearing knit sweaters. Okay. And I spent the better part of Miss Clark's English class. And it wasn't altogether wholesome. Okay. But she was thoroughly covered. I mean, she was pretty well armored. Nona was well covered. Have you walked through the halls of the local high school? I could barely make it in 1969. Okay, and I'm not completely responsible for that. That's the difference. Our culture is so much more stimulus-oriented, and apparently with no conscience. And I do say that with a little finger wagging. What are you thinking? And I realize I am fully responsible for my behavior. Do not hear me. Any human being is responsible for their behavior. All I'm saying is I think I am growing up in a more stimulating environment than even Amnon had. And he's darn royalty. So, Tamar. We know virtually nothing about her. In a typical good sex story, it's always good to keep the women one-dimensional. So, and the Bible doesn't, we know very little about her until we get to the backside of the story. You know what I mean by one-dimensional? In a culture of sex objects, that's what I mean. Who is this person? Well, she's what I want. That's what Amnon's saying. We're not particularly interested in her. We know virtually nothing about her. She's there. But she is the daughter of the king. Which means she has a boundary and a force field around her that probably most women in that culture didn't have. If Amnon had hit upon somebody else that didn't have the force field around her, like being the daughter of the king, it would have been a more difficult situation. So he had to be more cunning in living out his lust. And so Amnon could not summon Tamar. He couldn't say, "Come here, girl." I love to hear my wife and my daughter talk together now as adults. And it's actually kind of haunting. But Leslie used to walk, I have to back off there for a second. That would not be the right verb, walk the streets in Austin. I don't want to say that. Okay. But she would be traversing the thoroughfares throughout the community. And construction workers would, "Yo, girl, I love you," all that sort of stuff. And I assume that this is the common lot. And I always thought it was charming behavior. But I'm learning that this is not the way it is. And Amnon was one of those construction workers. And for any other girl, he could say, "Yo, girl." And he's royalty, and she better come. But not Tamar, because she had the force field around her. She was royalty. He'd have to answer to the king to that. So he's sick about it, literally sick about it. Here's Tamar. She's chattel. She's female in a culture of chattel, but she's royal chattel. So she's a notch above that. So she's somewhat projected. So his straightforward attack is not going to work. So he meets his buddy, his counselor, Jonadab. And Jonadab creates the Amnon-Jonadab conspiracy. He manipulates the king. He comes up with an idea. How can we get you two together? I know how to do that. Why don't you just ask your dad, for some... And he comes up with the whole strategy on how the two of them can come together. And so they conspire, and the coming together happens through a rouse. "I'm sick. Ask your sister to bring you some chamomile tea, and some dried toast. And he does, and that's what happens, and we know how that works. However, a few things. Amnon says after the rouse is exposed for what it is, a lie, he says, "Come here, dear." And she says, "No." Tamar refuses to play the game. She refuses to be in the conspiracy. And she offers 3 reasons to Tamar, or to Amnon, why you must not do this. First of all, it's a violation of the moral code. So everybody knew this was wrong. He knew it was wrong. Secondly, it will disgrace you, Amnon. You're going to have to call a press conference in Columbia, South Carolina, telling why you've been catting around. Do you want that on CNN? Thirdly, it's going to ruin my life forever. And then she offers the surprising plus. She says, "If you want me, ask the king that we might be married."